Inside a shadow-filled chamber, a smear of blood stretched across the floor, leading to a man barely clinging to life as he lay sprawled on the cold ground, while a woman named Waisola aimed her sword at him without hesitation. The wounded man was Guyang Chun, and with an icy voice, Waisola demanded to know the whereabouts of the remaining demonic humans. Guyang Chun offered no reply, choosing silence despite the danger he faced. As he stared at her, disbelief filled his mind, because he had never imagined that the legendary Waisola, the true successor of the Sword Supreme, a monster of strength who could erase hundreds of demonic humans in a single strike, and the very person who had slain the heavenly demon during the Great War between Orthodoxy and demons, would be standing before him now, questioning him instead of ending his life. Rage flashed in her eyes as Waisola suddenly seized Guyang Chun by the throat and accused him of knowing exactly where the survivors were hiding. Yet even then, he refused to speak. Finally, she coldly warned him that if even a trace of remorse remained in his heart, he would aid her in hunting down every last demonic human. Guyang Chun knew exactly where the surviving demonic humans were hiding, yet he was unable to answer Waisola even if he wished to, because his throat had been ruined beyond repair, and worse still, a deadly curse had been carved into his body. One spoken word would trigger it, causing his heart to burst instantly. To his surprise, Waisola suddenly broke down in tears, her voice shaking as she told him that this was the final opportunity he would ever have to reveal their location. She said that the entire world was calling for his execution, but she alone was ready to protect him if he cooperated, swearing that she would use every means possible to keep him alive. Trembling and overwhelmed, Waisola clutched him as she begged again and again through heavy sobs, pleading desperately for the answer she sought. Watching her like this, Guyang Chun felt confused, unable to understand why she was so obsessed with finding the remaining demonic humans that she would humiliate herself and cry before him. At first, he wondered if it was driven purely by her deep hatred toward them, but after thinking further, he realized the more likely reason was her captured fiancé, Jiang Xinyan, taken by the demonic humans, and that desperate love was probably what pushed her to this breaking point. Guyang Chun let out a faint smile, thinking it was almost laughable that the strongest woman alive could be shaken so badly over a single person, her betrothed. The moment Waisola noticed that smile, her patience snapped, and she hurled him back onto the ground without mercy. With fury burning in her voice, she spat that if she had known how rotten he truly was, she would have ended his life the very first time they crossed paths. She repeated that regret openly, saying sparing him back then was her greatest mistake. Hearing this, Guyang Chun felt confused, wondering which first meeting she meant, because the memory she held was likely not the same one lingering in his own mind. His thoughts drifted to long ago, when they were both still children and had met for the very first time, and he silently questioned how things had gone so terribly wrong to reach a future where he lay dying and she stood ready to deliver the final blow. In that moment, Guyang Chun accepted that he was nothing more than a betrayer who had sold out countless lives and chosen the side of demonic humans. And perhaps this suffering was simply retribution for every sinful choice he had made. As Waisola wiped away her tears and turned to leave, having gained nothing from him, a sudden sound echoed behind her, stopping her in her tracks. Waisola turned around and saw Guyang Chun dragging his fingers across the floor, using his own blood to carve out words. She demanded to know what he was trying to do, but at that exact instant, the curse bound to him awakened, triggered by his intent to reveal everything even at the cost of his life and the destruction of his own heart. Blood suddenly poured from Guyang Chun's mouth as unbearable pain tore through his chest, the curse pushing his heart toward violent rupture. The moment he violated its rules, death was guaranteed, as the spell was designed to crush his heart the instant he tried to betray it. This terrifying art was known as the Heavenly Demon's Forbidden Technique, branded onto him by the demon cult to ensure his absolute silence. Yet, even fully aware that exposing the truth meant certain death, Guyang Chun no longer hesitated and continued scrawling his message in blood, determined to let Waisola know everything. However, as each second passed, his vision blurred, his strength faded, and his body edged closer to collapse. Seeing his condition worsen so suddenly, Waisola rushed toward him in alarm and asked if he was all right. But Guyang Chun could barely hear her voice anymore as the world around him slowly slipped into darkness. Waisola begged Guyang Chun to stop, telling him that every movement was clearly tearing him apart. Yet Guyang Chun's thoughts drifted elsewhere as he imagined how different things might have been if he had been able to explain everything to her. to tell her that he had been set up, that none of this had been his choice, and he wondered whether she might have seen him in a different light and trusted his words. Even so, he pushed those thoughts aside, realizing it was pointless to dwell on such hopes now, because the past could no longer be undone no matter how much he regretted it. With trembling resolve, Gu Yongchun finished carving his final message into the floor using his blood, and at that very moment, the curse reached its peak and shattered his heart completely. As his body lay motionless, his fading mind questioned why he had been forced to endure such a cruel life in the first place. Memories of his past flooded in, scenes of endless suffering, of pain he had carried for years, and of the loved ones who had been dragged into that misery alongside him. Meanwhile, Wasiola clutched his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face as she stared at him, fully aware that Gu Yongchun was gone and that there was nothing she could do to bring him back. Gu Yongchun, a member of the Shangshigu clan, had been born into a prestigious family of the orthodox path and raised as a proper martial artist, yet before he ever turned his back on them to side with demons, the demonic, orthodox alliance had already fallen in the Great War, leaving him captured, brutalized as a war prisoner, and ultimately dead. As his final breath faded and darkness claimed his vision, Gu Yongchun suddenly heard an odd voice asking whether he wanted some potatoes, and when he opened his eyes in confusion, he froze in shock upon seeing a young Wai Sola standing before him. His mind reeled as he tried to understand what was happening, because he clearly remembered dying in her arms after breaking the heavenly demon's taboo, his heart exploding the moment the curse took full effect. There was no doubt in his memory. His life should have ended there without question. Yet now he was standing upright, alive and unharmed, his chest rising and falling normally, his heartbeat steady as if nothing terrible had ever occurred. Unable to grasp how death had released its grip on him, Gu Yongchun could only stare ahead in disbelief, wondering how he had returned to a time that should no longer exist. Gu Yongchun carefully looked around and examined his own body, only to realize in shock that everything had changed and that he was now back in the small, weak body of his childhood. For a moment, he thought this must be some strange illusion. Yet what confused him most was that this dream had taken him to the exact moment when he had first met Wasiola. Memories surfaced clearly in his mind, recalling how she had once shyly walked up to him and offered him a potato, only for him to coldly reject it and toss it onto the ground without hesitation. He remembered how arrogant and short-tempered he had been back then, furious that she dared to give him such plain food, scolding her for not knowing her place, and warning her never to offer him something so lowly again. Thinking back on it now filled Gu Yongchun with regret, and he silently cursed his past self for treating her so cruelly. Determined not to repeat the same mistake, he decided that even if this was nothing more than a dream, he would act differently and never hurt her again. Just then, Wasiola looked at him with a troubled expression and softly asked if he did not like what she had brought him. But before she could finish speaking, Gu Yongchun quickly reached out, took the potato from her hands, and smiled as he sincerely thanked her for sharing her food. Without thinking, he bit into it immediately, only to let out a loud scream moments later as the scorching heat burned his tongue, making him instantly regret his impulsive choice. Seeing Gu Yongchun struggle with the steaming potato, Wasiola couldn't hold it in and burst into laughter, smiling brightly as his face turned red from the heat. At that very moment, Gu Yongchun's guard, Muyin, rushed over and called out to him as young master, explaining anxiously that he had panicked when Gu Yongchun suddenly vanished and feared something terrible had happened. However, the instant Muyin noticed Gu Yongchun wincing and clutching his mouth from the burned tongue, his worry turned into anger, and he glared at Wasiola for daring to harm his master. Just as Muyin reached for his sword to teach her a lesson, Gu Yongchun quickly stepped in and stopped him, assuring him that he was perfectly fine. Gu Yongchun then casually asked Muyin for the honey cookie he was carrying, and although Muyin hesitated and said it was the very last one he had, Gu Yongchun took it anyway and placed it into Waisiola's hands. Muyin stared in disbelief, stunned that his young master had given away his final cookie to someone else. Waisiola looked up in surprise and asked if he truly meant to give it to her, and Gu Yongchun nodded without hesitation. With a shy smile, he told her that since she had shared her potato with him, it was only fair that he return the kindness with something of his own. Hearing this, Waisiola's eyes sparkled with joy, and she excitedly stared at the cookie, saliva almost dripping as she inhaled its sweet scent, since it was the first time she had ever been given something that smelled so delicious. While Wasiola was still staring at the cookie with shining eyes and saliva nearly spilling out, her grandfather suddenly rushed over, calling her name in panic as he searched for her. The moment she spotted him, Siola ran straight into his arms and hugged him tightly, causing her grandfather to finally breathe a sigh of relief upon confirming that she was unharmed. With lingering worry in his voice, he scolded her gently, saying she should never have let go of his hand and that he had been terrified when she vanished from sight. But Siola quickly cut him off and cheerfully told him not to worry, because she had already bought the potato they came for. Even so, her grandfather remained uneasy and asked once more if she was truly all right. Watching this scene, Guyan-chun felt his heart stir as memories from his past surfaced, and he immediately recognized who Siola grandfather was and what kind of person he would become in the future. Just then, Siola proudly told her grandfather that she had even shared a potato with Guyan-chun, pointing directly at him without hesitation. The instant her grandfather noticed Guyan-chun, he quickly pulled Siola closer, then bowed deeply toward Guyan-chun and apologized with utmost respect. The old man hurriedly explained that his granddaughter was still ignorant of social rules and may have acted improperly toward someone of Guyan-chun's status. Guyan-chun immediately shook his head and replied calmly that there was nothing to forgive, saying that if anyone owed an apology, it was actually him who should be grateful instead. He went on to explain that he had been feeling hungry at the time, and thanks to Siola, he was able to eat a potato that he truly enjoyed. As he spoke, Guyan-chun respectfully bowed to both of them to show his appreciation. He then added that the only thing he could offer in return was a honey cookie, which he gently presented while asking Siola if she would like to have it. Although her grandfather still looked uncertain and was about to speak, Siola quickly jumped in, her face lighting up as she happily declared that she would gladly accept the sweet treat. Just as Siola reached out for the honey cookie, her grandfather quickly pulled her back by the waist, his face pale with panic as he insisted they could not accept such a valuable item. Siola said they should not trouble him any further and that they would leave at once. As her grandfather prepared to hurry away with her, Guyan-chun suddenly called out and asked him to stop for a moment. The old man turned around nervously, fearing that Guyan-chun had finally taken offense, and was just about to bow and apologize again on behalf of his granddaughter, when Guyan-chun calmly took Siola's hand and placed the cookie into her palm, explaining that it was simply a thank you for the potato she had shared earlier. Seeing this, her grandfather froze in shock, then felt a wave of relief when he realized they would not be punished. Bowing repeatedly in gratitude, the two thanked Guyan-chun once more before quickly leaving the area. After they disappeared from view, Guyan-chun let out a long breath he had been holding in. Noticing his tense expression, Nguyen asked if speaking with them had made him uneasy, but Guyan-chun stayed silent, knowing full well that his nervousness came from a truth only he remembered: the true identity of Siola's grandfather in the future. Siola's grandfather was named Hyegun, and Guyan-chun clearly remembered that in the future, this man would rise to become the leader of the Murim Alliance and one of the legendary Three Supremes, known to all as the Sword Supreme. Thinking about this, Guyan-chun felt uneasy, wondering why someone of such overwhelming status was wandering around a place like this. And even if this was only a dream, he realized he had nearly offended a man who could have erased him with ease. Just then, Siola turned back once more and happily waved goodbye, and Guyan-chun responded with a gentle smile, his gaze following her until she was gone. Nguyen then reminded Guyan-chun that it was time to return home, and Guyan-chun nodded in agreement. As they walked away, Guyan-chun believed his heart felt light, convinced that he had resolved his regrets and that it was finally time to awaken from the dream. Yet, to his growing irritation and confusion, the dream did not fade even after he arrived back home. He began to question why he was still trapped in this scene, thinking that if it truly were a dream, he should have woken up by now. A troubling thought then crossed his mind, that perhaps this strange situation was not a dream at all, but something connected to the heavenly demon's curse instead. While Guyan-chun was still lost in thought, a familiar voice suddenly called out, and when he turned toward it, he saw his second older sister, Guyan-seo, the woman known throughout the clan as the Flame Sword. Meeting her immediately made him uneasy, as she was the sibling who held the deepest resentment toward him. Guyan-seo walked up with a sharp gaze and remarked how amusing it was to see Guyan-chun appear at a clan gathering when he had always avoided them in the past. With a mocking smile, she warned him that if he had come to cause trouble or embarrass the clan, he would be better off leaving now before things spiraled out of control. Guyan-chun waved off her words and replied calmly that he was only present because he had no choice, adding that since he had ignored so many meetings before, he intended to apologize to the clan head afterward. Hearing this only fueled Guyan-seo's irritation, her anger flaring instantly. She raised her voice as her aura burst forth, accusing him of scheming once again and telling him to stop whatever nonsense he was planning, as his very presence was enough to enrage her. At that moment, Guyan-chun cut her off and told her to calm down, pointing out that their father, the clan leader, had arrived. Riding in on horseback, their father looked at the two of them and demanded to know what all the noise was about. Everyone present, including Guyan-chun, bowed respectfully as the patriarch arrived, yet despite returning the greeting, Gu Yangchun's father fixed him with a sharp, doubtful stare that immediately made Gu Yangchun's heart sink. The patriarch dismounted from his horse and asked a nearby aide whether any sword units were currently free, to which the man replied that the first unit had just returned and was resting, while the fourth unit remained on standby. After hearing this, the patriarch calmly ordered that the fourth sword unit be fully prepared and summoned to meet him. Watching this unfold, Guyan-chun couldn't tell whether this world was a dream or reality, but the heavy pressure from his father's gaze felt painfully real. Just as he was lost in uneasy thoughts, the patriarch called Guyan-chun over and instructed him to come meet him alone after the meal was finished. Those words instantly filled Guyan-chun with dread, and he hurriedly whispered to Muyan, asking if he had any digestive pills, since he was certain his nerves would prevent him from properly digesting a single bite. Soon after, Guyan-chun found himself seated at the same table as his father and his older sister Guyan-seo, and he couldn't help thinking that the suffocating silence during their meals never changed. His hands trembled so badly that he wasn't even sure whether the food was going into his mouth or up his nose, and with the looming private meeting already weighing on him, Guyan-chun silently wished someone, anyone, would break this unbearable stillness. Their father soon addressed his second child, Guyan-seo, and mentioned that he had heard she recently made progress in her cultivation. With visible delight, Guyan-seo replied that she had gained a small breakthrough and reached the level of a 3-star martial artist a few days ago. Hearing this, the patriarch nodded in satisfaction, praising her for advancing so quickly at her age and urging her to keep training diligently without losing focus. As Guyan-seo thanked him respectfully, Guyan-chun reflected that her achievement was indeed remarkable, though not surprising, since she possessed outstanding talent and paired it with relentless effort. Watching her smile under their father's praise, Guyan-chun briefly thought she looked far better when she smiled. Yet that thought vanished instantly when Guyan-seo turned and stared at him with open disdain, as if he were something unpleasant she had stepped on. At that moment, their father called Gu Yangchun's name and asked about rumors that he had gone wandering through the streets, and Guyan-chun calmly explained that he had simply stepped out for a short while to handle a minor matter. After hearing his response, their father announced that he would excuse himself from the table, telling his children to continue eating and finish the meal on their own before standing up to leave. Guyan-chun felt puzzled by his father's earlier question, sensing that the patriarch had wanted to say more but chose to hold his words back at the last moment. While he was still wondering why his father had initially requested a private meeting, a maid approached and relayed a message, saying that the clan head wished for Guyan-chun to rest well for the night and come to his chambers alone the next day. After finishing his meal, Guyan-chun returned to his room, since he still had not awakened from what he believed to be a dream. A troubling realization struck him, that perhaps this was not a dream at all, but reality itself, and that he might have experienced the legendary phenomenon of regression he had only heard stories about. With that thought came another idea, that maybe he had been given a second chance to change history and strike down the heavenly demon before everything went wrong. However, the notion quickly collapsed, as Guyan-chun knew all too well that his current strength was nowhere near enough to challenge such a monster. He clearly remembered how the heavenly demon had single-handedly slain all 3 supremes, being said to stand above the heavens themselves, and against such overwhelming power, Guyan-chun understood that he did not stand even the slightest chance. As Guyan-chun thought back on his past life as a cursed demonic human, trapped under the heavenly demon's control just to survive, he felt a wave of regret wash over him. But at the same time, those regrets made him realize something important. If he truly had been given a second chance at life, he wanted to make different choices this time. He remembered that in his previous life, Yahello would eventually defeat the heavenly demon, and the demonic cult would fall apart. So, until all that happened, he decided to live quietly and avoid trouble. With a newfound determination, Guyan-chun promised himself he wouldn't repeat the mistakes of before. To test his strength, he focused his energy, but was crushed to find that his inner power was almost empty. Seeing how weak he was made him appreciate even more how talented his sister was. Just 1 year older, yet already a powerful 3-star martial artist. Guyan-chun wasn't ready to give up or feel hopeless. He knew there was still something he could do. He could train using the Gu Flame Wheel art, a special cultivation method passed down only to the Gu family bloodline. So, he began focusing on building his internal energy, aiming to make it stronger and bigger step by step, slowly growing his power. Gu Yongchun knew that when he reached the 4-star level, he'd be able to release flames of eternal energy. And if he pushed himself to become a 7-star, that fiery energy would surround his entire body, becoming like a second skin. But for now, he was just a 1-star. So his first goal was to get to 2 stars as quickly as possible by gathering and refining his internal energy. Gu Yongchun also decided that unlike before, he wouldn't rely on the powers of demonic beings. He had to grow his own strength if he wanted a better life this time. As he focused all his effort on cultivating his energy, he soon realized pushing any further today could be dangerous, maybe even fatal, so he reluctantly decided to stop and rest for now. Lying on the floor, exhausted, Gu Yongchun thought about how difficult it was to control his internal energy at his current level. He knew that pushing too hard could cause energy deviation, which would be dangerous. Still, after testing his limits, he smiled quietly. He had finally reached early stage 2-star, a small but important step forward. He decided to take things slow but steady, neither rushing nor dragging his progress. This time, he promised himself his new life would be different. No reckless mistakes that could ruin his future. The next morning, Gu Yongchun woke up confused by the soreness in his whole body. Even though he had only trained a little, he realized it was his own fault. His body wasn't used to intense exercise after so long of neglect. Understanding that the road ahead would be long and hard, Gu Yongchun steeled himself, knowing he had to work tirelessly if he wanted to succeed. Gu Yongchun reached for the door handle, thinking about his plan to visit the clan head that afternoon. But the moment he opened the door, he was surprised to see Yahello sitting on the floor, looking up at him with a bright smile. Long ago, the sky suddenly darkened and cracked like shattered glass. People stared in shock, unsure what was happening, when monsters burst through the cracks and began attacking humans. Those cracks were portals to the demon world, allowing creatures from another realm to invade. To fight back, every sect raised special groups called sword units. Fighters trained specifically to battle these monsters. Each sect had at least 1 sword unit. The Gu clan had 5, and Gu Yangchun's oldest sister, Gu Weibai, led the 5th unit. While she was busy leading soldiers, Gu Yongchun was known as a troublemaker and often faced her strict punishments. As she dragged him by the collar, that was the moment he first truly met Yahello. Though their meeting was supposed to happen 6 months later, here she was now, smiling warmly at him just after he woke up. Seeing Yahello, Gu Yongchun thought maybe he hadn't really woken up and was still dreaming, so he tried to step back in his room. But before he could, Yahello grabbed his clothes firmly. She smiled warmly and said it was nice to meet him again. Just as she was about to say something important, her grandfather, Yahello, suddenly appeared and interrupted them. Yahello slapped his granddaughter's hand, making her release Gu Yangchun's clothes. He reminded her firmly that she must not be disrespectful to the young master, Gu Yongchun. Gu Yongchun looked puzzled, not understanding what was going on. Yahello then told Yahello to apologize for her rude behavior. Feeling a bit down from being scolded, Yahello apologized to Gu Yongchun for not acting properly. Gu Yongchun, however, remained confused about the whole situation. Gu Yongchun was still trying to wrap his head around everything when the old man stepped forward and spoke. Yahello calmly introduced himself, saying his true name was Mun, and declared that from this moment on, he would devote himself to serving Gu Yongchun as repayment for a favor owed to the clan head. This only left Gu Yongchun even more baffled. In his previous life, Yahello's grandfather was known clearly as Yahello, yet now that same man was standing before him under a completely different name. Before Gu Yongchun could speak, a young girl stepped forward and politely greeted him, introducing herself as Yahello and explaining that she would be helping her grandfather serve him as well. Hearing this, Gu Yongchun froze in shock. The idea that both of them would suddenly become his attendants was far beyond what he expected. Letting out a quiet sigh, he reasoned that if they were acting under direct command, then the order must have come from the clan head himself, most likely his own father. With that thought, Gu Yongchun couldn't help but feel uneasy, realizing that his newly regressed life had already dragged him straight into something far bigger than he had prepared for. Gu Yongchun greeted the pair politely and asked them to call him simply Yongchun. Yahello nodded and said he understood his request, yet the very next moment, he continued to address him as young master anyway. Not long after, Gu Yongchun sat on the floor, still dazed by the absurd scene before him. The man who had once been feared across the world as the Sword Supreme in his past life was now sweeping dust off the ground and waiting on him like a servant. Even more shocking was the sight of that same legendary figure calmly washing his clothes, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Nearby, Siola walked with a pile of laundry stacked in her arms, clearly struggling under the weight. Seeing this, a few maids felt sorry for her and offered to lend a hand, but she quickly refused, insisting that she could manage on her own. The moment those words left her mouth, her foot caught on a loose stone, and she tumbled forward, scattering both herself and the clothes across the ground. Everyone rushed toward her in alarm, only to freeze halfway in confusion. They were worried about Sola lying flat on her face, yet unsure how to react since she had firmly turned down their help just seconds earlier. Sola lay sprawled on the ground, feeling foolish about her mistake, and before she knew it, tears welled up in her eyes. As the maids helped her back to her feet, Guyan-chun watched her with a puzzled look, wondering how someone could be so hopeless at simple tasks. He had always believed that Sola should possess natural talent in martial arts, so seeing her this clumsy shocked him. While he was still lost in thought, Sola suddenly walked up to him, staring straight at him with teary eyes that looked ready to spill over. Seeing her like that, Guyan-chun asked why she had come over instead of returning to her work, but she softly replied that she had been instructed to stay by his side wherever he went. He asked who had given such an order, and with trembling lips and watery eyes, she answered that it was her grandfather. Guyan-chun couldn't understand why they would assign her to watch over him, and after a moment of reflection, he concluded that they probably pushed the responsibility onto her simply because they found him troublesome and didn't want to deal with him themselves. At that moment, Guyan-chun reflected that he was still the son of a respected clan, which made him question whether it was really acceptable for his personal attendants to be chosen so casually. As Sola quietly just his clothes, he decided that having her serve him was not a problem. Yet the sudden change in his life and the need to adapt to a lifestyle he had never lived before felt overwhelmingly heavy. Sola then told him that she was simply straightening his outfit, but when Guyan-chun glanced down, he realized his clothes somehow looked messier than before, prompting him to say that he would handle it himself, a comment that clearly left her disheartened. And he wondered whether the clan head was aware of who these two truly were, or if he simply did not care and had assigned them to Guyan-chun without a second thought. Remembering that his father had summoned him earlier that day, Guyan-chun decided that the only way to understand this strange situation was to meet him and demand some answers. Just as Guyan-chun was about to leave, Sola hurriedly told him to wait, saying she would go with him wherever he was heading, but he stopped her and asked where she thought she was going, then told her to stay behind and keep working so she could properly learn how things were done. Hearing this, Sola grew gloomy and looked ready to cry. Yet after a brief pause, she swallowed her disappointment and nodded in agreement. From afar, Haegun silently watched the exchange without interfering. Guyan-chun could tell that Sola was unhappy, but he still chose to leave her there, believing that learning her duties well would be better for her in the long run, and reminded her to focus on finishing her work. As she pouted over being left behind, Guyan-chun called back while walking away, promising to bring her a treat when he returned and telling her to do her best. The moment she heard that, Sola instantly perked up, her sadness vanishing as excitement took over, leaving everyone nearby stunned by how easily her mood flipped from tears to cheerful anticipation. At that time, Guyan-chun stood outside his father's chamber, feeling an unexpected sense of unease. In his previous life, he had never been particularly close to his father, and he couldn't recall a single moment where they had spoken privately like this, which only made the situation more intimidating. He wondered if his father had summoned him because there was something important he needed to say, and decided that once his father finished speaking, he would ask about Sola and Haegun, and why they had been placed in the quarters near his own. While Guyan-chun lingered by the door, lost in his thoughts, his father suddenly appeared and asked what he was doing there, causing Guyan-chun to jump in shock and blurt out that he had nearly scared him to death. After they entered the room and settled down, his father asked if he had already met his newly assigned attendants, and Guyan-chun replied that he had indeed seen them and even exchanged greetings with them. Guyan-chun's father then asked him how he felt about the new attendants, and Guyan-chun replied that he was thankful for the consideration, yet he couldn't help but ask why his father had chosen those particular people. In response, his father calmly told him not to press for answers and said that everything would be explained when the right moment arrived. Hearing this, Guyan-chun immediately realized that his father had sent Haegun and Sola to him while fully aware of who they truly were. He began to suspect that some kind of agreement had been made with Haegun, which was likely the reason they now served him. His father then waved off the matter, telling Gu Yongchun not to concern himself with such trivial issues, and instead instructed him to get ready for the unified dragon assembly that would take place the following day, to which Gu Yongchun nodded in agreement. Even as he accepted the order, a sense of confusion crept in, as he struggled to recall what the unified dragon assembly actually was, until suddenly the memory struck him, and his expression shifted in shock as he finally remembered its true significance. After finishing his talk with his father, Gu Yongchun stepped outside. Looking completely drained, he suddenly told his bodyguard, Mian, he had no desire to attend the unified dragon assembly. Startled and worried, Mian asked if his master truly hated the event so much that he would rather die than go, to which Gu Yongchun answered without hesitation that he absolutely loathed it. The Unified Dragon Assembly was a major gathering where new members were selected for the sword units, held twice a year for those warriors who risked their lives sealing the gates to the demon realm in order to protect the Gu clan and the people of Shangxi, making attendance mandatory, especially for those of the clan's direct bloodline. Thinking about this only deepened Gu Yangchun's misery, and he once again told Muyin to end his life, convinced that death was the only excuse that could free him from attending. Muyin quickly shut that idea down, nervously explaining that if Gu Yangchun skipped the assembly, his father would personally hunt him down and kill him anyway. Muyin then added that Elder Li would also be present at the assembly, and upon hearing that name, Gu Yangchun froze in shock, his reluctance to attend growing even stronger. Muyin then warned Gu Yangchun that if he tried to escape, Elder Li himself would track him down and beat him senseless, which immediately made Gu Yangchun grimace. Among all the elders, Elder Li was especially terrifying in his eyes, as he firmly believed that Gu Yangchun, being the clan's only son, had to uphold proper manners and carry the honor and reputation of the entire family. Gu Yangchun admitted to himself that although Elder Li's methods were harsh and strict, he was someone he owed a great deal to, yet that didn't stop him from thinking the old man was incredibly annoying. Thinking about it now, Gu Yangchun found it almost impressive how he still managed to grow up feeling like a failure in both his past life and this one, despite enduring such brutal training. Shaking his head, he asked Muyin when they would depart, and Muyin replied that they would leave as soon as everyone finished preparing. Off to the side, several servants gathered around Yahello, chatting excitedly as they praised her looks and joked that she would shatter countless hearts once she grew older. The noise eventually caught Gu Yangchun's attention, and he called over a servant named Manhwa to ask if they were ready yet, only for her to hurriedly apologize and explain that they were still busy tending to Yahello. Hearing that, Gu Yangchun sighed, assuming Yahello had caused trouble yet again, but at that very moment, she stepped forward and everyone froze in shock at just how strikingly beautiful she looked. The moment Gu Yangchun laid eyes on Yahello, he was completely spellbound, his mind going blank as her beauty left him unable to speak. She soon broke the silence herself, cheerfully telling him that everyone had been calling her pretty and boldly asking if he thought so too. Her question hit him like a blow, and Gu Yangchun's face instantly flushed bright red from embarrassment. Deep down, he fully agreed that she was beautiful, but saying it aloud felt far too awkward, so he dodged the question by pretending not to hear it and quickly changed the subject, asking if everyone was ready to head to the assembly. Yahello tried once more to get an answer from him, but he avoided her again, which made her shoulders droop as sadness crept onto her face. Not long after, the group set off toward the Unified Dragon Assembly, and once inside the carriage, Yahello excitedly leaned out of the window, shouting that the speed was amazing and that she loved how fast they were going. One of the attendants laughed and asked if this was her first time riding in a carriage, and she nodded eagerly, saying it truly was her first ride. Gu Yangchun leaned out of the moving carriage and called down to his bodyguard Muyin, asking where the Unified Dragon Assembly was being held. Muyin replied that the event would take place at the Heavenly Exchange. Muyin then added that the journey would take roughly 4 hours, suggesting that Gu Yangchun rest for a while since the road ahead was still long, and Gu Yangchun agreed, feeling the exhaustion from staying up all night training finally catching up to him. Just as he was about to settle in, Yahello suddenly chimed in with bright excitement, proudly telling one of the servants that although horse meat had a strange smell, it was surprisingly delicious, a comment that once again drew stunned looks from those around her. Yahello's non-stop chatter finally got on Gu Yangchun's nerves, so he grabbed a honey cookie and gently shoved it in her mouth, instantly silencing her. With her attention fully taken over by chewing, the carriage finally grew quiet, allowing Gu Yangchun to relax and drift into a short nap as they continued toward their destination. Sometime later, he felt someone shaking him awake, and as he slowly opened his eyes, Waisila eagerly asked if he had any more cookies since she had already finished the one he gave her. Guyan-chun told her bluntly that the cookie she ate was the last one he had, which made her slump in disappointment. One of the servants quickly told Waisila to inform her master that they had already arrived. Upon hearing this, Guyan-chun sat up and pulled aside the curtain, looking out the window to see what awaited them outside. Once Guyan-chun stepped out of the carriage, he immediately noticed that the marketplace was far more crowded than usual, leading him to assume that the ongoing festival was the reason for the surge of people. While he stretched his stiff body and scanned the lively surroundings, a man approached him with a polite greeting, commenting that the journey must have been exhausting. Guyan-chun turned to look at the speaker and learned that the man was Chun Ishil, the deputy head merchant of the Heavenly Exchange. Chun Ishil then expressed how honored he was to finally meet Guyan-chun, praising him as the Gu clan's rising talent, which prompted Guyan-chun to return the greeting and say that meeting Chun Ishil was an honor for him as well. Chun Ishil went on to explain that the first day of the festival had gone exceptionally well, crediting Elder Li and Gu Yangchun's elder sister for the smooth preparations. Hearing his sister mentioned made Guyan-chun quietly hope he wouldn't run into her during his stay, but fate had other plans, and as he followed Chun Ishil down the path, he suddenly found himself standing face to face with his sister, Guyanseo. The moment Guyanseo laid eyes on Guyan-chun, her expression hardened with clear irritation. When Guyan-chun politely greeted her, she snapped back, telling him not to speak so casually since just seeing his face had already ruined her mood. She went on to say that although she didn't expect him to stir up trouble during the Unified Dragon Assembly, he should abandon any foolish thoughts that might embarrass the clan, warning him that nothing was more disgraceful than dragging the family name through the mud. Hearing this, Guyan-chun calmly replied that she didn't need to concern herself with him, assuring her that he planned to keep his head down and stay quieter than a mouse the entire time. Guyanseo scoffed at that and sharply told him that she wasn't worried about him in the slightest. At that point, her sharp gaze shifted and landed on Waisila, who immediately stiffened, then hurriedly ducked behind Guyan-chun to hide. Seeing this only irritated Guyanseo further, and she coldly remarked that Waisaich's old habits clearly hadn't faded, questioning whether she planned to behave the same way here as well. Confused, Guyan-chun asked his sister what she meant, but Guyanseo ignored him and addressed Waisila instead, saying she had thought the girl might have changed, only to conclude with a dismissive tone that people never truly do. Guyan-chun couldn't quite understand what his sister was hinting at, but he chose to brush it aside and told everyone that it was time to move on. When they arrived at the area where the festival and the assembly were being held, Guyan-chun was left stunned by the sheer scale and grandeur of the venue. Waisila gazed around in awe and told him that she had never seen a structure so massive in her life. Guyan-chun thought to himself that although he had heard merchants often measure their wealth by how extravagantly they hosted festivals, he was still amazed that they could pour such an absurd amount of money into a single celebration. After all, today's festival existed to honor the sword units and celebrate their unwavering dedication in protecting the people. On that day, duels were scheduled to select new members for the sword units, and Guyan-chun felt relieved that, being of the direct bloodline, he didn't have to fight. All he needed to do was sit back and enjoy watching others compete, thinking that nothing would happen to him as long as he stayed out of the action. Just as he was happily lost in thought, a massive figure radiating an overwhelming aura suddenly appeared behind him and Waisila. The man's deep voice cut through the air. "So you didn't run away this time?" Guyan-chun jumped in surprise at the sudden presence, and as he turned to face the man, the giant reached toward him, making him panic and immediately think he needed to defend himself. But before anything could happen, the tension melted away as the same imposing figure gently patted and ruffled Guyan-chun's head with a cheerful smile. To his shock, it was Elder Li. Elder Li looked at him with curiosity, commenting that Guyan-chun always ran away whenever they met in the past, but now he stood there calmly. Flustered, Guyan-chun explained that someone had warned him he would be folded in half if he skipped the festival, which was why he hadn't run this time. Elder Li's eyes widened in shock as he asked Guyan-chun who would say such a harsh thing, only for Guyan-chun to point out that it was actually Elder Li himself who had said it first, leaving him puzzled at the surprised expression. Hearing this, Elder Li burst out laughing and praised Guyan-chun, saying he was impressed that his young charge had finally learned to talk back, all while continuing to pat his head. Guyan-chun couldn't help but think that Elder Li had always been oddly obsessed with him, probably because he was the only son of the clan head and carried so many expectations on his shoulders. Just then, Waisila piped up excitedly, referring to Elder Li as a bear and joking that bears were tasty, just like horses, but before she could continue, Elder Li's gaze snapped to her, sharp and angry. Terrified, Waisila froze, realizing she had gone too far, and as Elder Li's stern look stayed fixed on her, she began to tremble, teetering on the edge of tears from pure fear. Gu Yanshun quickly stepped in between Elder Li and Wai Xiola, jokingly telling Elder Li that his intense stare was frightening everyone. Wai Xiola, still trembling, hid behind him and whispered softly that she would never eat bears again. Elder Li's expression shifted as he looked at Gu Yanshun and asked if the girl next to him was his concubine. Gu Yanshun shook his head and pointed at her simple clothes, explaining that she was just his servant. Elder Li seemed skeptical, clearly finding it hard to believe that their relationship was purely that of master and servant. Changing the subject, Elder Li reminded Gu Yanshun that the Unified Dragon Assembly was happening tomorrow, and even though he would only be watching, it was already late and he needed to get some rest to be ready for the event. Gu Yanshun agreed, and Elder Li added sternly that if he even thought about running away, he wouldn't let it slide and would personally make sure Gu Yanshun faced the consequences. They parted ways with Elder Li, and as Gu Yanshun caught up to her, Wai Xiola whispered nervously, asking if the bear would try to eat him. Meanwhile, Elder Li walked back, quietly thinking to himself that Gu Yanshun was indeed special and worthy of his attention. The next morning, the long-awaited Unified Dragon Assembly finally began. Gu Yanshun told Muyin he had expected it to start early, but after seeing the long line of participants, he realized it wouldn't begin until around lunchtime, and Muyin nodded in agreement. Watching the crowds, Gu Yanshun noted that anyone from the Shanxi clans, or anyone who could prove their identity, was allowed to compete for a place in the sword units. Yet he hadn't anticipated there would be so many contenders. Shaking his head at the sheer scale, he remarked to Muyin that joining a sword unit was clearly no easy task, and Muyin agreed with a serious nod. Trailing behind Gu Yanshun, Wai Xiola looked completely terrified, still shaken by the thought of Elder Li and convinced he might come for her head at any moment. Annoyed by her over-the-top fear, Gu Yanshun scolded her, saying that if she was going to be that scared, she should have stayed back at the headquarters. Wai Xiola quickly defended herself, explaining that her grandfather had ordered her to stay by Gu Yanshun's side no matter what. Realizing he couldn't tell her to defy the Sword Supreme, Gu Yanshun let the matter slide. He reassured her that there was nothing to worry about since his bodyguard Muyin could easily handle Elder Li if needed. Muyin's expression grew serious, warning him quietly that not even a single finger could touch Elder Li and reminded him to speak of him with proper respect, as Gu Yanshun had been casually mentioning the name as if it were nothing. Even though Muyin was whispering, Wai Xiola caught every word and immediately felt terrified again, realizing she was far from safe with Elder Li around. Gu Yanshun, knowing full well that Elder Li wouldn't harm her, decided to have a little fun and teased her further, saying today was the day she would die. After teasing her for a few moments, he finally reassured her, laughing, that it was all a joke and that nothing bad would happen. Wai Xiola declared that if she was going to die, she wanted to die well-fed, pointing eagerly at a nearby dumpling stall with drool forming at the corners of her mouth, explaining that her grandfather had said ghosts who die with full stomachs look prettier. After a while, Gu Yanshun gave in and bought dumplings for Wai Xiola. Muyin watched him and commented with a smile that he was really treating his servant well, even though she was technically just a servant. Gu Yanshun blinked, confused, and asked if he was talking about Wai Xiola, to which Muyin nodded. Gu Yanshun scratched his head, unsure why buying dumplings for her counted as treating her well. Muyin chuckled and explained that Wai Xiola didn't really understand the idea of a servant. She always acted toward Gu Yanshun like family, yet he still chose to buy her dumplings. Gu Yanshun opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. He honestly couldn't explain why he treated her that way, even though she was only his servant. Muyin just smiled wider, clearly amused by Gu Yanshun being at a complete loss for words. Muyin spoke up then, telling Gu Yanshun that he did not match the image painted by the rumors. He said gossip should never be taken as truth and admitted that meeting Gu Yanshun made him realize how much he still had to learn. Curious, Gu Yanshun asked how long Muyin had been assigned to him. Muyin answered that he had served as his personal guard for roughly 2 weeks. Hearing this, Gu Yanshun realized Muyin must have been placed by his side just before his regression. While lost in thought, a sharp scream suddenly rang out, startling Gu Yanshun and everyone nearby. A guard could be heard scolding the woman he was escorting, warning her not to stray too far, where she could put herself in danger. The woman brushed off his concern, insisting there was no threat and that he was being overly cautious. She confidently stated that the Unified Dragon Assembly was underway, and with so many members of the Gu clan present, no one would be foolish enough to stir up trouble. When Gu Yanshun heard her speak, the sound felt strangely familiar, yet he could not recall where he had heard it before. At that moment, the guard warned her again, saying her carefree wandering was exactly what concerned him. He added that if she kept moving around without caution, she might cross paths with the Gu clan's heir, the very person they were trying to stay away from. Hearing this, Gu Yanchun was taken aback that someone he had never met was deliberately avoiding him. He quickly reasoned that they might be referring to another heir, since the Gu clan had many notable figures. The woman dismissed the idea, telling her guard that such a meeting was unlikely with so many people gathered, and that she would not encounter him so easily. Just then, Gu Yanchun suddenly realized whose voice it was. As she turned around, she found Gu Yanchun standing directly in front of her, the person she least expected to see, and her eyes widened in shock. For a brief moment, she and Gu Yanchun locked eyes in stunned silence. Right then, Muyan stepped closer and quietly told Gu Yanchun that both the woman and her guard looked as if they had just witnessed something terrifying upon seeing him. Muyan then softly asked whether Gu Yanchun recognized who they were. At that instant, Gu Yanchun was certain there was no chance he could forget the woman standing before him. Her shoulder-length hair framed her face, her dark, sharp eyes stood out, and a ring rested on her finger, etched with a symbol only noticeable upon close inspection. To Gu Yanchun, who already understood its meaning, the ring held a significance he knew all too well. The woman facing him was from the Hebei Peng clan, his former betrothed, and her name was Peng Aoi. The engagement itself had a straightforward origin. The Hebei Peng clan was one of the 4 great clans, and an alliance through marriage made sense. The Gu clan matched their status. Both families had heirs of similar age, and Gu Yanchun was expected to inherit his position without issue, making the match appealing to the Peng clan. However, things did not go as planned. The problem stemmed from Gu Yanchun himself and the chaos he had caused. Yet the true blow that completely damaged the bond between the 2 clans was what Gu Yanchun had said directly to his fiancée, Peng Aoi, words that left a lasting scar on their relationship. The moment Peng Aoi spotted Gu Yanchun, she demanded to know why he was there, but before she could finish speaking, Gu Yanchun cut in and threw the same question back at her. Peng Aoi answered that she had come to Shangxi for personal matters. She quickly added that Gu Yanchun did not rule over all of Shangxi, so she had no reason to explain her movements to him. Growing irritated, she questioned why he was speaking to her so bluntly and reminded him that she was still a year his senior. Gu Yanchun laughed it off, saying he had completely forgotten about that detail and suggested they both let it go. He then turned his attention to Wai Siola, calling out to her and telling her to return once she finished buying the dumpling she wanted. As Wai Siola hurried toward him, smiling brightly and carrying far more dumplings than expected, Gu Yanchun looked back at Peng Aoi and told her that whatever brought her here, he hoped her stay would be pleasant. With that, he offered a brief farewell and walked away. Peng Aoi remained irritated that Gu Yanchun had spoken to her so casually and without any respect, especially when she was older than him. As she watched him walk away, she felt frustrated that this encounter happened while she was already overwhelmed by problems caused by her troublesome brother. Her gaze then shifted to Wai Siola, who was walking beside Gu Yanchun, and Peng Aoi realized she had never seen the girl before, wondering if she was his attendant. Seeing how adorable and lively Wai Siola looked next to him, Peng Aoi briefly thought that Gu Yanchun might have softened and changed for the better. Her thoughts drifted back to their first meeting, recalling how Gu Yanchun had spoken cruelly to her, dismissing her worth and mocking her for being born to a concubine. The memory reignited her fury, and she lost control, grabbing Gu Yanchun by his clothes and demanding that he repeat his words. Gu Yanchun responded coldly, his voice sharp and threatening, stating that everything he had said before was true and that she meant nothing to him because she was merely a concubine's daughter. In the next instant, Peng Aoi swung her left fist and struck Gu Yanchun square in the face, sending him crashing backward. As he lay sprawled on the ground, she spoke through clenched teeth, saying she had been willing to tolerate everything, the engagement, the ugly rumors, even his reputation, for the sake of the Peng clan. However, she declared that he had crossed a line this time, and that she no longer cared about the marriage and would make him answer for his cruel words. In her thoughts, Peng Aoi believed that nothing had truly changed, and that Gu Yanchun must still be the same arrogant man he had always been. Yet, as she watched him now, she sensed something unfamiliar, as if the man before her was no longer exactly the same person. She noticed how Gu Yanchun gently assisted Wai Siola, speaking to her softly without a trace of his former harshness. Even so, Peng Aoi quickly dismissed the idea of his growth, convinced that someone as reckless as him could never truly mature. While Peng Aoi was still lost in her thoughts about Gu Yanchun, a booming shout suddenly rang out from nearby. The sharp voice startled everyone in the area. Muyin quickly turned to his master and asked if Guyan-chun was hurt, and Guyan-chun calmly replied that he was fine. Meanwhile, Ycola looked more concerned about whether the dumplings Guyan-chun was carrying had survived the chaos. At the entrance, one of the officials managing access to the Unified Dragon Assembly scolded the shouting man, saying that yelling would not solve anything. In response, the man raised his voice again, snapping that he had no time to waste and demanded immediate entry into the assembly. The loud and impatient man was Peng Wujin, the older brother of Peng Aoi. Peng Wujin boldly declared that he would take full responsibility if Peng Wujin were caught causing trouble. Hearing this, the gatekeeper grew wary, suspecting that Peng Wujin might be a fugitive trying to force his way inside. After realizing his words had sounded suspicious, Peng Wujin quickly told the official to disregard what he had just said and demanded to be admitted into the Unified Dragon Assembly at once. Hearing this exchange, Guyan-chun quietly remarked to Muyin that anyone could join the assembly, but only if they could properly prove who they were. Even so, the gatekeeper refused to grant Peng Wujin entry. One of the guards then placed a firm hand on Peng Wujin's shoulder and warned him to calm down and stop making a scene. In a sudden burst of anger, Peng Wujin grabbed the guard's arm and slammed him heavily onto the ground. The surrounding guards cried out in shock, demanding to know what he thought he was doing after throwing one of their own to the floor. Peng Wujin boldly declared that his strength alone should be proof enough and insisted he now deserved access to the assembly. The official coldly replied that after attacking a guard, there was no chance he would be allowed inside. Watching the chaos unfold, Muyin asked Guyan-chun if they should step in. Guyan-chun shook his head, telling him they would stay out of it and move on, as he had no desire to be dragged into unnecessary trouble. He added that the matter would settle itself soon enough, and there was no reason for them to interfere. The official raised his voice at Peng Wujin, telling him that things could not be done however he pleased. He reminded him that strict rules were in place, and without proper identification, no one was allowed to enter the Unified Dragon Assembly. Peng Wujin argued back, claiming his martial ability alone should grant him access, but the official firmly replied that strength meant nothing without proof. Finally losing his patience, Peng Wujin shouted that the official was showing disrespect to the young clan head of the Peng clan. Gasps spread through the crowd as everyone realized who he truly was. In the past, on a snowy morning, Peng Aoi had once asked her brother, Peng Wujin, what he was doing outside. Wujin greeted her cheerfully and explained that he was keeping warm by the fire because of the freezing weather. He added that he was also roasting a sweet potato at the same time. Confused, Aoi asked why he was doing this right in front of her room and questioned what he was holding along with the potato. Wujin casually replied that the sweet potato was cooking too slowly, so he decided to use a wooden plaque he had received as a badge to fuel the fire and make it burn hotter. Hearing his answer, Aoi immediately smacked her older brother on the head, furious at his foolishness. Startled, Wujin demanded to know why she had hit him, only for her to snap back that he had earned it. Aoi then asked if he even understood what he was holding. Wujin, clearly irritated, replied that it was nothing more than firewood. She scolded him, explaining that it was actually a Peng clan plaque personally granted by the clan head. It was a precious reward given to the top graduate of the Divine Dragon Academy and marked him as the youngest successor in history, making it incredibly valuable. Aoi nearly lost her temper again and moved to hit him once more for his ignorance. As Wujin raised his arms to shield himself, Aoi stopped and spoke sternly, telling him to start behaving like a true successor since he would one day lead the clan. She admitted she often could not understand what went on in his head, but reminded him that despite his young age, he possessed outstanding talent and ability and had already been chosen as the heir. Because of all he had achieved, she could not comprehend why he still seemed so unsatisfied. After hearing Aoi's words, Wujin smiled at her with a gentle expression and admitted that all he truly wanted was to leave that place. Aoi paused, then told him that if that was his wish, he should go and return only after spending some time away. Excited by her answer, Wujin eagerly agreed and soon left behind a short letter for Aoi, simply saying that he was heading out for a while. However, Aoi's anger flared when she looked at the note again months later, realizing that 4 whole months had passed and her brother still had not come back. Just then, one of her attendants approached and informed her that the beggar sect had gathered information, saying they had last spotted Wujin in Shangxi. Hearing this, Aoi was confused and frustrated, wondering why he had traveled so far when he had promised to return before long. Back in the present, Wujin continued yelling at the top of his voice, demanding to be allowed into the Unified Dragon Assembly. He insisted that he had already revealed everything necessary about who he was and shouted that there was no longer any reason to deny him entry. The official firmly told Wujin that he did not have the authority to grant him entry into the assembly. Wujin refused to accept that response and snapped back that he had no patience left to argue because he needed to attend the Unified Dragon Assembly. Wu Jin boldly added that he could reveal the Dark Knight Blade if that was what it took to convince them. Hearing those words, Gu Yongchun stiffened in shock, since the Dark Knight Blade was a secret art passed down only through the direct bloodline of the Peng clan. Deciding he wanted no part in such troublesome matters, Gu Yongchun quietly planned to slip away before things escalated further. However, just as he moved, Elder Li appeared and placed a firm hand on his shoulder, stopping him in place. Elder Li then addressed Wu Jin, saying that since he knew of the Dark Knight Blade, a technique exclusive to the Peng bloodline, there was no reason to doubt his identity. Turning to the official, Elder Li added that Wu Jin clearly possessed enough skill and suggested they allow him to take part in the assembly. After hearing Elder Li's words, Wu Jin lowered his head in respect and expressed his gratitude for being permitted to join the Unified Dragon Assembly. He then formally introduced himself, stating that his name was Peng Wu Jin, the chosen heir of the Peng clan. He added that it was an honor to meet Elder Li, the famous master known as the Pure Flame Fist of the Gu clan. At this, Elder Li burst into laughter and remarked that it had been a long time since anyone had called him by that old title. Elder Li waved away their doubts, saying he was confident Wu Jin was being truthful and that there was no cause for suspicion. He explained that Wu Jin strongly resembled his father and pointed out that only members of the Peng clan possessed such a sturdy, powerful build, which Wu Jin clearly had. As further proof, Elder Li drew attention to the ring Wu Jin wore, noting that it was a symbol carried exclusively by the Peng clan. Elder Li soon shifted the conversation and asked Wu Jin why the heir of the Peng clan would want to enter a contest meant to recruit new fighters for the Gu clan sword division. Without hesitation, Wu Jin replied that life in the Peng clan felt dull to him, so he joined the competition hoping to become part of the Gu clan instead. Gu Yongchun nearly lost his composure, thinking Wu Jin must be completely reckless, but Elder Li burst into laughter at the unexpected answer. Still smiling, Elder Li asked whether Wu Jin had received his family's approval for such a decision. Wu Jin grinned and admitted that he already knew his family would never agree, so he simply chose to run away. Elder Li laughed even harder at this, while Gu Yongchun silently concluded that Wu Jin was utterly foolish. Elder Li then remarked that Wu Jin appeared well-trained and asked how old he was. Wu Jin replied that he was 23. Hearing this, Elder Li was visibly surprised that someone so young could display such skill, and he inwardly thought that the Peng clan had raised an absolute prodigy. At that moment, Elder Li glanced toward Gu Yongchun with clear disappointment and told Wu Jin, while gesturing in Gu Yongchun's direction, that he wished Gu Yongchun would learn even a fraction of Wu Jin's drive. Hearing Elder Li's words, Muyin quickly tried to comfort Gu Yongchun, saying that the elder surely had not meant him. Wai Siola tilted her head and innocently asked Gu Yongchun why Elder Li had called him an idiot, and he snapped at both of them to be quiet, saying they were hurting him more than Elder Li ever did. Wu Jin was a terrifying talent with overwhelming strength, and come to be known across the land as Blade Emperor Peng Wu Jin. While Gu Yongchun was still lost in these thoughts, Peng Aoi suddenly rushed over, her face filled with both worry and relief as she spotted her brother. Peng Wu Jin was just as happy to see her again, but the moment he stepped forward to greet her, Peng Aoi lashed out with a fierce kick straight to his face. A powerful aura surged from her body, showing just how enraged she was. She was furious that Wu Jin had the nerve to call himself the Peng clan successor after running away without a word. Staggering from the blow, Wu Jin hurriedly tried to explain himself, pleading with Aoi to give him a moment to tell her everything that had happened. After hearing his plea, Peng Aoi coldly asked her brother what excuse he possibly had this time. Wu Jin, realizing he had nothing reasonable to say, nervously begged her to at least spare his life. That only fueled her anger, and she struck him again, determined to teach him a proper lesson for his actions. As she continued beating him, Gu Yongchun quickly told Elder Li that Wu Jin might actually be beaten to death if this continued, and suggested they step in to stop the siblings. Elder Li initially waved it off, saying the Peng clan were known for their tough bodies, and that Wu Jin would survive even something far worse. However, as he glanced back at Wu Jin, who was now desperately reaching out for help, Elder Li hesitated, beginning to doubt his own words, as it suddenly looked like Wu Jin might truly be beaten to death by his furious younger sister. At that point, Elder Li stepped between the two and firmly told Aoi to stop, warning her that if she continued, she might actually kill her brother. Aoi turned around in surprise and froze when she realized it was Elder Li. She immediately halted and greeted him respectfully. Bowing deeply, Aoi apologized for not introducing herself earlier and stated her name as Peng Aoi. Aoi bowed once more and promised that she would remember this incident and properly make it up to him later. She then told Elder Li that they would take their leave and would not cause any further disturbance. Hearing this, Wu Jin suddenly spoke up, telling Aoi that she was free to leave, but he was staying behind to compete and join the sword unit. Wu Jin looked at her with a serious expression and told her plainly that he was not joking this time. Seeing that Wu Jin was no longer joking, Aoi questioned him seriously about why he insisted on joining another clan. Wu Jin answered honestly, saying life in the Peng clan felt dull, and he wanted to enjoy himself elsewhere before he was forced to take on the role of clan head. He went on to explain that the only real ways to escape that fate were to be crippled or killed, and he had no interest in either option. Wu Jin admitted that he had no desire to lead the clan, but aside from himself and Aoi, he felt everyone else in the family were nothing more than beasts hiding behind the clan's name. He told Aoi not to worry about him and promised that he would still become the Peng clan's leader one day, because he would never allow her to shoulder that burden in his place. That was why he had accepted the title of successor, even though he had no wish to rule. Gu Yanshun turned to Elder Li and asked once more whether allowing Wu Jin to join the event was truly wise. Elder Li fell silent, forced to reconsider, as he wanted Wu Jin to compete, but also wished to keep the Gu clan out of internal matters of the Peng family. After giving it some thought, Elder Li suddenly smiled and proposed a solution. He told Wu Jin that he would be allowed to join the event only if he could defeat Elder Li in a match. Both Aoi and Gu Yangshun were stunned by this suggestion and silently wondered if the elder had lost his senses, since there was no chance Wu Jin could overcome him. Elder Li then laid out the conditions. If Wu Jin managed to touch him, even once within those 10 moves, Wu Jin would be declared the victor. Hearing this, Wu Jin grew serious and asked if that was truly the only requirement. Elder Li replied calmly that he would never deceive someone over a matter like this. The instant those words left his mouth, Wu Jin rushed forward at full speed, slipping behind Elder Li to strike. However, in a blink, Elder Li turned to face him and scolded him for being too hasty. His fist shot out immediately, smashing into Wu Jin and sending him flying backward, knocking him unconscious on the spot. Elder Li laughed loudly, announcing his victory, while Gu Yanshun and Aoi stared on in complete shock at what had just occurred. Right after that, Gu Yanshun questioned Elder Li, pointing out that the elder was supposed to avoid Wu Jin's attacks rather than strike back. Elder Li calmly replied that he had never made such a promise. He added that it had been a sparring match they both agreed to, and there was no need to worry since he had held back enough strength for Wu Jin to regain consciousness later. Gu Yanshun then stated that if the Peng clan came looking for whoever had knocked Wu Jin out, he wanted no involvement in the matter. Elder Li waved it off and told him not to concern himself with such things. Gu Yanshun then turned to Peng Aoi and clarified that Elder Li alone was responsible for what had happened to Wu Jin. Aoi nodded and said it did not bother her at all. In fact, she admitted it was a relief to see her brother lying unconscious, as she had no idea what kind of chaos he might cause if he were still awake. Hearing this, Elder Li burst into laughter and explained that he had suggested the duel in the first place simply because he thought it would be amusing. Listening to that, Gu Yanshun could not help but think about how someone like Elder Li, with such an attitude, had ever risen to such a respected position. Just then, Wai Siola called out Gu Yangshun's name. Hearing her voice, Gu Yanshun suddenly remembered that she used to be afraid of Elder Li. So he turned toward her and told her they should move away from him. However, what he saw completely contradicted his expectation. Wai Siolah's eyes were shining with excitement after witnessing the brief clash, clearly amazed that Elder Li had defeated Wu Jin with a single strike. Watching her enthusiasm, Gu Yanshun could not help but wonder how someone like her had once managed to save the world in the past. Noticing Wai Siolah's excitement, Elder Li smiled and told her she was an adorable child. He then reached into his pocket and handed her a cookie as a small gift. The moment she saw it, Wai Siola grew even more thrilled. She cheerfully told him that she had liked him from the very beginning. Hearing this, Elder Li looked genuinely pleased. Elder Li then shifted his gaze to Gu Yanshun and teasingly asked if he felt left out since only his servant had received a gift. He laughed and said it would not be fair if Gu Yanshun got nothing. Gu Yanshun quickly replied that he disliked sweets and that Elder Li did not need to give him anything at all. Before he could finish, Elder Li cut him off and declared that after the Unified Dragon Assembly ended, Gu Yanshun would be participating in an exhibition match, and that refusal was not an option. Not long after, the crowd gathered inside the arena. The announcer's voice echoed loudly as he declared that the long wait was over. Gu Yanxio looked at Gu Yanshun and asked if he had no intention of drawing a sword. Hearing that, Gu Yanshun tried to recall whether he had even relied on a blade in his previous life. The Gu Flame Wheel art could be used with many weapons and was especially powerful when paired with either a sword or bare hands. In the end, Gu Yanshun realized that his fists had always suited him better, which was why he had eventually abandoned using a sword altogether. Gu Yanxio cut in, smiling in a dangerous way. She told him that it made no difference to her whether he used a sword or his fists, because she was simply thrilled to have this chance. Confused, Gu Yanshun asked what kind of chance she meant. Gu Yanxio answered with a grin, saying she was delighted to finally have a proper excuse to beat her little brother, Gu Yanshun, and to do so in front of such a large crowd. Just then, Gu Yongchun recalled Elder Li's earlier words about forcing him into an exhibition match. And to make matters worse, it was against his own sister, Gu Yanxiu. Turning toward the elder, Gu Yongchun loudly demanded to know why he had to take part at all. Elder Li casually replied that he did not want the audience leaving with the impression that the Gu clan lacked excitement. Of course, Gu Yongchun knew better. He could clearly tell that Elder Li was doing this simply because he found the situation amusing. Gu Yongchun briefly decided that he would step into the match only to give up halfway, avoiding unnecessary attention and trouble. However, before that thought could settle, Elder Li warned him that surrendering midway would earn him the same treatment Wu Jin had received. Gu Yongchun then asked if Elder Li truly wanted to see him beaten and humiliated in front of such a massive crowd. Elder Li answered him seriously, asking whether Gu Yongchun honestly intended to lose. That question lingered in Gu Yangchun's mind. He realized he could not throw away this rare second chance at life, nor could he afford to invite chaos by acting recklessly. At the same time, he did not want to waste his strength on a battle that had never even occurred in his previous life. Back in the present, Gu Yanxiu took her stance and coldly told Gu Yongchun that she despised him, since he would naturally inherit the clan head position simply because he was male. The moment the duel began, she rushed forward and unleashed a storm of fierce strikes. After several exchanges, Gu Yanxiu froze in disbelief when she realized that someone ranked at only 2 stars like Gu Yongchun had avoided every single one of her 3-star attacks. Meanwhile, Gu Yongchun calmly analyzed the situation, realizing he was dodging by moving just a fraction earlier than her timing allowed. Even so, the constant movement left him breathing hard, making it clear that his training was still insufficient. He quickly searched for a way to end the match, briefly considering letting himself take a hit, but immediately questioned whether he would survive even one of Gu Yanxiu's blows. At that instant, Gu Yanxiu seized his clothing, preventing his escape, and mocked him for doing nothing but evading. As she spoke, she slashed her sword toward him, yet Gu Yongchun narrowly slipped away once again, escaping the strike by the smallest margin. While slipping away from her strikes, Gu Yongchun spoke up and told Gu Yanxiu that swinging her sword with such clear intent only made her moves easier to read. Even as he spoke, Gu Yongchun wondered just how deep her hostility ran. At that moment, Gu Yanxiu unleashed her anger, saying she had long forced herself to accept that she would never become clan head simply because she was a woman, no matter how hard she worked. What enraged her most was that her younger brother, someone she viewed as lazy and irresponsible, could push her aside and be named the next leader purely because he was male. She shouted that Gu Yongchun would never understand her frustration, since he always avoided responsibility, never tried to improve himself, and was seen by everyone as talentless, yet was still favored by the clan. In her rage, she told him that if he intended to live such a meaningless life, he might as well vanish. As she slashed her sword at him, she cruelly told him to disappear, just like his mother had. In that instant, Gu Yongchun caught her wrist mid-swing, his expression turning dark as he demanded she repeat what she had just said about his mother. At that instant, memories from the past flooded Gu Yanxiu's mind. Her older sister had been the most impressive person she had ever known. By the time she was 15, her sister had already earned the title of Sword Phoenix. Soon after, she was named the 5th leader of the Gu clan's sword unit, gaining the respect and praise of everyone around her. Yet despite all her achievements, she could never become the clan head. That position was destined for Gu Yongchun, the son of a concubine. Although they were only half-siblings, Gu Yangchun's mother treated Gu Yanxiu with great warmth and kindness. Gu Yanxiu grew fond of her and often spent time together with both mother and son, and those days were peaceful and happy. However, everything fell apart after a single event. One day, Gu Yangchun's mother suddenly vanished without a trace. Even more shocking was the fact that their father never sent anyone to search for her, and simply let the matter fade away. From that moment on, Gu Yongchun began to change. His words became cold and harsh, his behavior sharp and unfriendly, and soon rumors spread that he was mistreating everyone around him, even his own servants. Despite the countless ugly rumors surrounding him and all the trouble Gu Yongchun caused, nothing about his position ever changed. He was still set to become the next clan head, simply because the role had always belonged to a man. Gu Yanxiu and her sister, who had trained relentlessly and clearly deserved recognition far more than him, were completely overlooked. This unfairness lit a deep anger inside Gu Yanxiu. Back in the present, Gu Yongchun tightly seized Gu Yanxiu's wrist and demanded, his voice filled with rage, that she repeat what she had just said. Sensing a dark and threatening pressure pouring out from him, Gu Yanxiu immediately realized she was in serious danger. She quickly jumped backward to put space between them, but Gu Yangchun moved even faster. In the blink of an eye, he appeared right behind her, cutting off her escape. In the stands, Peng Aoi watched with wide eyes, completely drawn in by Gu Yanxiu's power. Even though they were the same age, Gu Yanxiu's skill was clearly on another level. As the siblings fought, Aoi noticed their lips moving, as if they were whispering to each other, so she quietly asked one of her attendants if she could make out what they were saying. Before the maid could answer, Peng Wujin suddenly appeared and told his sister that it was impossible to hear them. He explained that Elder Li had placed a sound barrier around the arena, blocking every word exchange between Gu Yangchun and Gu Yanxiu. Wu Jin then casually asked Aoi if the fighter on stage was the Sword Phoenix's younger sibling. Aoi immediately began praising Gu Yanxiu, excitedly explaining how incredible and talented she was. However, Wu Jin cut her off and said he was not asking about Gu Yanxiu at all. He was actually curious about Gu Yangchun instead. One of the maids stepped in and explained that both fighters were younger siblings of the Sword Phoenix. Hearing this, Wu Jin's interest in Gu Yangchun deepened even more. Aoi, meanwhile, stared at her brother in surprise, since she had never seen him look this intrigued before. While Aoi was still wondering about Wu Jin's reaction, Wu Jin suddenly spoke up and said that the duel was already over. As Gu Yangchun slipped behind Yanxiu, he raised his hand, ready to strike with overwhelming force. The moment Yanxiu sensed the danger, she realized she had to evade it or everything would end there. She tried to move away, but it was pointless. Gu Yangchun's strike was far too quick and far too strong. Just as he was about to bring the match to a close, Gu Yangchun reflected that he finally understood the reason behind Yanxiu's hatred. Even after all the cruel words she had thrown at him and his mother, he could see where her anger came from. Still, understanding did not mean forgiveness. With that resolve, he unleashed a crushing blow that ended the duel and sent Yanxiu collapsing unconscious onto the ground. Once everything was over, Gu Yangchun found himself sitting alone outside the arena. He felt a deep sense of regret for defeating his sister, since winning had never been his intention. He had not expected that a simple 2-star internal energy strike would make her nose bleed and knock her out cold. As he replayed Yanxiu's words again and again in his mind, guilt weighed heavily on him. He wished he had handled things differently and silently prayed that she had not suffered any lasting harm. Just then, Muyin and Waixiola hurried over with anxious faces, asking Gu Yangchun if he was injured and whether he was all right. He asked what was happening inside the arena. Muyin hesitated and warned him that the news might make him uncomfortable, then explained that everyone had expected Gu Yangchun to be completely crushed by his sister. Instead, the crowd was in an uproar because Gu Yangchun had been the one to claim victory. Hearing this, Gu Yangchun said it was only natural. After all, no one would believe that someone known as a troublemaker could defeat Gu Yanxiu, who was praised as a rising star. Just then, Wai Xiaola noticed that Gu Yangchun's hand was in terrible shape and quickly asked him what had happened to it. Seeing her concern, he told her it was nothing serious, but Wai Xiaola refused to ignore it. She pulled out a piece of cloth, gently grabbed his hand, and started wrapping it to hide the wounds, clearly worried about him. But as he watched her closely, he realized she was having trouble bandaging it, since she had never done this before. When the cloth wouldn't stay in place, Wai Xiao's eyes filled with tears, upset that she couldn't help him properly. At that very moment, Wu Jin suddenly stepped in and broke the tense silence. Gu Yangchun felt annoyed when Wu Jin showed up, but he brushed it aside and politely introduced himself, saying it was nice to finally meet him. Wu Jin returned the greeting just as casually. Nearby, Aoi hid behind her attendant, clearly flustered about facing Gu Yangchun again, and quietly urged her brother that it was time to leave. Wu Jin noticed her discomfort and teased her gently, saying it was only natural to feel awkward since she and Gu Yangchun had once been promised to each other. Gu Yangchun, however, was already tired of Wu Jin's chatter and wanted him gone, so he bluntly said that getting close to someone like him would bring them no advantage at all. Instead of taking offense, Wu Jin burst out laughing and said he had always believed Gu Wibi was the only true genius in the Gu clan, but discovering someone as skilled as Gu Yangchun made him rethink that idea. Hearing this, Gu Yangchun asked if Wu Jin actually knew his eldest sister, Gu Wibi. Wu Jin replied that they had crossed paths often and were on good terms, though he admitted he wasn't sure how she truly felt about him. From that answer alone, Gu Yanshun could tell that Wu Jin and his sister were not nearly as close as Wu Jin claimed. Gu Yanshun said it was getting late and suggested that everyone head out. Just before leaving, Aoi lingered in place, clearly holding something back. Yanshun noticed and asked her what was on her mind. After a short pause, Aoi admitted that on the day their engagement ended, she had gone too far by smashing a chair over his head, and she wanted to apologize for that. Hearing this, Yanshun also bowed his head and said he owed her an apology as well, admitting he had insulted her by calling her a concubine's child. He told her that while he was still childish now, he had been far worse back then, and he probably deserved that beating, so she didn't need to feel guilty about it. Aoi smiled at his words and said she accepted his apology. Before turning away, she reminded him not to lose what her brother Wu Jin had slipped to him. Confused, Yanshun reached into his pocket and found a small plaque marked with the Peng family's emblem. He was about to ask what it meant, but Aoi had already walked off, leaving him standing there with questions. Night had fallen, and with the unified dragon assembly over, it was time for Yanshun to return home. As the carriage rolled along, his thoughts kept drifting back to the clash with his sister. No matter how hard he searched his memories, he couldn't recall ever crossing blades with her in his past life, let alone defeating her. Ever since Yahello had come into his life as a servant, things had slowly begun to veer away from the future he once knew. Yanshun began to wonder if that one small moment of kindness he had shown Yahello when they first met had triggered all these changes. Lost in thought, Yanshun suddenly felt a heavy, unsettling presence nearby. He immediately told Muyin to check the demon detection talisman. After examining it, Muyin said nothing seemed wrong, explaining that the charm would shine on its own if a demon realm gate appeared. He told Yanshun not to worry, but the moment those words left his mouth, the talisman flared with bright light. Seeing this, Muyin's expression turned serious. He ordered the carriage to halt at once and warned everyone that a demon realm gate was close. He then commanded the group to take battle positions, reminding them that their top priority was to protect their young master. As Muyin was giving his warning, Yanshun had already jumped out of the carriage. Muyin immediately told him to get back inside, saying it was too risky for him to be out in the open, but Yanshun brushed it off and said he could listen to the scolding later. He told Muyin to stop worrying about him and focus on the demon realm gate that had appeared in front of them. Demon realm gates came in different colors, and each shade showed how dangerous the gate was. The one standing before them glowed green, which meant it was the weakest type and the lowest threat. Just then, demons began crawling out from the opening one after another. Yanshun calmly assessed the situation, thinking that even though the gate was low-ranked, it could still cause trouble if they were careless, though it was nothing they couldn't handle. Every demon shared the same fatal flaw, a demonic stone hidden inside its body. That stone worked much like a human heart, and once it was removed, the demon would instantly die. Yanshun knew that if all he had to do was pull out those stones, the fight would be simple. Unfortunately, reality wasn't that easy. He still had to battle the monsters head-on, and at his current strength, that was a problem. Even so, Yanshun clenched his teeth and decided he had no choice. If he wanted to stay alive, he had to keep using the flame wheel arts, no matter how much it strained him. Just then, Muyin rushed in to support Yanshun, who was clearly struggling. He stepped in front of Yanshun and cut down every monster that was closing in on him. Yanshun stared in shock, stunned by how easily Muyin handled them, since he couldn't recall Muyin being this powerful in his past life. After finishing the attack, Muyin quickly asked if Yanshun was hurt. Yanshun let out a breath of relief and thanked Muyin for stepping in and saving him. Not long after, Muyin had completely wiped out all the creatures that had emerged from the Green Demon Realm Gate. Muyin then grew serious and asked Yanshun why he had jumped into the fight himself. He admitted he had been worried something bad might happen and that Yanshun could have been badly injured. Yanshun replied that everything was over now and told him not to dwell on it anymore. However, the moment he said that, a strange purple aura suddenly burst out from Yanshun's hand. A sharp, unbearable pain shot through him, and he cried out loudly. Everyone nearby panicked at his scream, while Yanshun himself was confused, unable to understand why this was happening all of a sudden. The purple energy wrapping around his hand was a forbidden technique of the heavenly demon. It was an art that absorbed demonic power, known as the demon well absorption art. At that very moment, as Yanshun was writhing in pain, the flame will art he practiced reacted on its own and began devouring the demonic energy pouring out from his hand. Yanshun was stunned by the sight, since he had no memory of something like this ever happening in his previous life. After a short while, the dark energy faded away, and his body slowly returned to normal. Everyone around him had been watching nervously and immediately rushed to ask if he was all right. Yang Chun waved them off and said it was nothing serious, adding that the pain probably came from injuries he hadn't noticed earlier during his fight with his sister. Hearing this, Muyin insisted that they find a physician right away to examine him. Deep down, Yang Chun decided it was better to keep the incident with the demonic energy a secret, since nothing good would come from others knowing he had absorbed such power. Just then, Wai Silentious' eyes filled with tears as she worried over him. Yang Chun tried to reassure her, saying it wasn't that serious, but she pointed out that his face still looked pale and unwell. That comment irritated Yang Chun, and he was about to respond when another servant stepped in and scolded Wai Siola, telling her to help take care of Yang Chun instead of pestering him. Muyin once again urged Yang Chun to see a nearby physician. Yang Chun shook his head and replied that he was perfectly fine, explaining that all he needed was a full night of rest, and he would recover on his own. While they were getting ready to depart, Yang Chun realized he could no longer sense any trace of demonic energy inside his body. This made him wonder if the Gu Flame Wheel art had somehow dealt with it. When he noticed that the demonic stone had lost its color, he understood that all the energy within it had been fully absorbed. Without hesitation, he crushed the stone in his hand and told himself it was time to move on. The following day, Wai Siola tugged at Yang Chun excitedly after spotting a stall selling honey cookies that looked irresistibly good. Yang Chun, however, walked straight past without even glancing at them. Pouting, Wai Siola complained and asked why he had brought her along if he had no intention of buying her any sweets. Yang Chun calmly reminded her that he had business to attend to in the market and that she was only there because she had used her grandfather as an excuse to tag along. At that point, Muyin spoke up and asked his master why he had come to the market at all, reminding him that he hadn't fully recovered yet and suggesting it would be wiser to head back home. He then asked Yang Chun if there was something specific he was searching for, offering to help find it. Yang Chun told Muyin that he appreciated the concern, but this was not the moment for help. Just then, his eyes narrowed as he focused on a narrow alley ahead. Noticing this, Muyin asked what was wrong. Yang Chun suddenly spoke and told Wai Siola to return home, then ordered Muyin to follow him. Startled, Wai Siola immediately asked why she had to leave. Yang Chun calmly explained that she should go back to the clan first and inform the others that he would return the next day. Even then, she stubbornly refused to move. With a sigh, Yang Chun resorted to bargaining and promised her 10 honey cookies if she went home right away. Wai Siola quickly added that dumplings had to be included too, and just like that, the deal was sealed with a firm handshake. Muyin then asked where they were heading, but Yang Chun only replied that he would understand soon enough. As they walked deeper into the streets, Muyin pointed out that the area they were entering was known to be dangerous. Yang Chun acknowledged this and, moments later, said they had arrived. A strange, shadowy building stood before them. Yang Chun muttered that he had been worried it might not still be here, while Muyin questioned why they had come to such a place. Instead of answering directly, Yang Chun asked Muyin if the place felt strange. Muyin nodded and admitted that the building itself gave off an unsettling presence. Hearing this, Yang Chun felt quietly satisfied that Muyin had sensed it too. When they pushed the door open and stepped inside, several men turned toward them, confused, asking why a child had wandered in and whether the two had taken a wrong turn. At that moment, one of the men noticed the sword in Muyin's hand and whispered to the others, asking if they should just kill the pair on the spot. Just as Muyin was about to draw his blade, one of the men spoke up and warned Yang Chun that this was not a quiet place for a child to wander into, asking why someone so young had come here. Yang Chun calmly replied that he had arrived as a paying customer. The man scoffed and said the boy was far too bold for his age, adding that cutting out his tongue would cure that arrogance. Muyin burned with anger at the insult aimed at his master, but Yang Chun motioned for him to stay still. Yang Chun then remarked that the man must have already known who he was the moment he stepped inside, and questioned why they feared the Gu clan clearing out the area, pointing out that such an act would hurt the clan as much as them. With that, Yang Chun smoothly changed the subject, smiled confidently, and demanded to see the regional overseer before the situation became ugly. The man was caught off guard by those words, and the surrounding men slowly closed in as he sneered that he would teach the child what respect meant since he clearly lacked it. Yang Chun shot back that none of them seemed particularly respectful either. The man burst into laughter, then abruptly turned cold and ordered the others to strike the boy. Muyin instantly drew his blade and warned the men not to touch his young master. In the blink of an eye, he cut down more than a dozen of them in mere seconds. The remaining men froze in shock, stunned by how terrifyingly strong the boy's guard was. The leader clenched his teeth, thinking that since the child was the Gu clan's heir, it made sense he would be protected by a madly skilled escort, and he muttered that he couldn't just drag a child like this to see the regional overseer. While he was struggling to decide what to do next, one of his underlings hurried over and whispered that the regional manager had sent a message. The captain's face darkened as he realized the situation had already reached higher ears, and he quickly asked what the message said as the two whispered urgently to each other. Watching this, Yang assumed they were scheming and decided he had no patience left, ordering Muyin to wipe them all out. Before Muyin could move again, the captain suddenly shouted, rushed to open a door, and announced that the regional manager wished to meet Yang. Yang clicked his tongue in irritation and remarked that the man should have said that from the start, then calmly told Muyin to put his sword away, which Muyin did without hesitation. Yang then told Muyin it was time to move, but Muyin admitted he still didn't fully understand what was going on, so Yang explained that he originally planned to contact the Beggars sect, though there were complications. That sect had risen into the top 10 purely through the value of its intelligence. Yet because they belonged to the orthodox side, they avoided tasks that could stir serious trouble. Yang knew the favor he needed would cross that line, so he had to look elsewhere. If the Beggars sect ruled the orthodox world of information, then the house sect stood at the top of the unorthodox side, which was why he had come here instead. As they went downstairs, a man stepped forward and politely introduced himself as Du Wenshu, the Shangxi branch head, apologizing for the rough welcome and saying they never expected someone like Yang to appear. Yang brushed it off and asked straight away whether they would take his request, but Du Wenshu first questioned why Yang hadn't gone to the Gu clan's affiliated Beggar sect and had instead approached a smaller, unorthodox group like theirs. Yang replied calmly that his task was something the Beggars sect couldn't handle and only the house sect could manage. When Yang asked why they kept probing him, Du Wenshu quickly apologized and explained that, because of Yang surname, caution was unavoidable and hoped he would understand. Yang nodded, said he did, and repeated his question, asking once more if they were willing to accept the job. Du Wenshu replied that the house sect never turned down work as long as the reward was sufficient, and Yang immediately took that as agreement and said he would treat it as them accepting his request. He then handed over a sheet of paper and explained that he was searching for a boy who should now be a little over 10 years old. Du Wenshu studied the sketch carefully, and after a long look, he suddenly apologized and said they had to retract their earlier words because this was a task they could not take. He explained that a previous client had not been after the child himself, but rather the person guarding the boy, and asked Yang to understand their position. Yang calmly asked whether they would still refuse even if the payment involved information about the house sect's leader, and the room instantly fell silent as all eyes turned toward him. In the next breath, weapons were drawn from every direction, but Muyin reacted at once, intercepting the attacks before anyone could touch Yang. With a grim expression, Du Wenshu demanded to know how Yang was aware of such a thing, while Yang smiled and said he wasn't here to play guessing games, adding that what truly mattered was that both sides held something the other wanted. Du Wenshu pressed him on whether he could prove his claims, but Yang replied that they should verify it themselves, reminding them that careful thinking was essential in desperate times. Though clearly angered, Du Wenshu said nothing as Yang continued, remarking that if they had no interest, he would simply take his business to the Beggars sect and might casually mention a few sensitive details about the house sect's leader along the way. After hearing those words, Du Wenshu said he understood, and Yang calmly moved forward with what he had planned from the start, asking how long the search would take. Du Wenshu answered that it would likely require about 3 months, and Yang accepted the timeline without complaint. As he prepared to leave, Yang told him that once the boy was found, they would trade more secrets with each other. Du Wenshu remained lost in thought, and just before walking out, Yang casually dropped a single phrase in his direction, the sharp mountain range, which immediately startled him. Yang explained that this was merely an advance payment for their cooperation and then left without another word. Du Wenshu sat in silence, thinking deeply, until the captain asked whether they could really trust the child's claims, and Du Wenshu replied that since the boy knew confidential details about the sect leader's disappearance, they had no choice but to take him seriously. He then wondered what kind of mind Yang possessed, noting that the strength of the guard at his side meant the boy likely expected hostility from the start, and he concluded that such information could not have come from Yang alone, firmly believing that the head of the Gu clan was also part of this hidden game.